So let me first tell you why we're starting and why we're starting here in the general order of Masechet Shabbos, because we did the first parak, and the end of the first parak got off topic, which sometimes happens. But do you remember the beginning of the topic of the first parak?
The very beginning was handling things in and putting
right. So the first half, the first 10, the first parak was about 20 dapim, and surely the first half, maybe a little more, was all about carrying in and out and various variations on that. It's called Yitzias HaShabbos. So it's going in and you take, there's an ani and out, there's an ani outside, there's a balbais inside. So they went back and forth and all kinds of permutations on that. And that's the opening for Masechet Shabbos. And you get here in the middle of chapter 7, you get the Malachos of Shabbos. It sounds like things were a little inverted. And of course, you're going to say that's the way things are. But it's not really true. The order of Masechet Shabbos is a chronological order according to the day. Okay, so in other words, there is a logic to the way the Masechta is set up. But before you can start talking about, therefore, the malachas that will come up, and that's what we're going to be discussing now, it starts with the beginning of the day, and the first thing that happens is you go out, right? Or just about, you got to get prepared. Yeah. Well, not the morning, the evening even, when Shabbos starts. That's going to be the first halacha that comes up even before you get to the meal, right? Or just as Shabbos starts. And then that's the first parak. The second parak is Bameh Madlikin. And that's about lighting candles, what wicks you can use. And by the way, if you learn just the Mishnayos, you really see the order. The Gemara tends to go from tangent to tangent, but the Mishnayos tend to be arranged by topic. The third parak called Parak Kira, talks about cooking, and that's when you Friday night after you light the candles and after you daven, you're going to sit and you're going to have a first meal. The fourth parak is called Bamet Tomnin. It deals with something about Katmana, which is a little complicated. Not only can you not actually actively cook something on a stove or in a stove, but you can put something in an enclosed, insulated area where it would increase the heat. For example, so it's very difficult to understand, but sometimes maybe certain chemical reactions, if you put something and insulate them, even if there's no fire, the heat itself will begin to increase inside. So the third and fourth parak go together. And then you have the fifth and sixth parak, which talks about one is Bameh Behema Yotza, with what an animal can go out, and that's not considered carrying. Like if you need an animal, a leash is not carrying, a bit, a saddle, all these things. And then the next parak is, or I forgot which the order is, Bameh Ishi Yotza, where the woman goes out wearing jewelry. Jewelry is also not carrying. So what's considered jewelry? What's considered extraneous? What's considered clothing? What's not considered clothing? So that's the first parak through the sixth parak, and then that's where the order of the way things come up. These are the first malachas that are going to hit you, going in, going out, lighting candles, carrying, and that's and cooking and preparing food. So that's really the first six prakim. That takes quite a bit of time, because especially within the Gemaras, it tends to get off topic. In fact, the second parak, in the middle of the second parak of Masechet Shabbos, which talks about Bameh Madlikin, about candles and oils and wicks and so forth, is a whole excursus about Chanukah. There's about 4 dapim about Chanukah, 3 or 4 dapim about Chanukah, because that's candles and wicks, and you compare the candles and the wicks of Chanukah to Shabbos, and so and it talks the whole story. If you ever want to learn about Chanukah, it's in the second parak of Masechet Shabbos. Okay, and then we get to the seventh parak, and the seventh parak really is where it starts. The first half of the second parak talks about what happens if you forgot it's Shabbos, what happens if you forgot it's a Malacha, what happens if you never knew it was Shabbos, right? Not that you forgot. So all that really that's the first half of this parak. And then the second half of this parak is really, now that we kind of set you up, we're going to tell you what the malachas are, the 39 malachas, 40 minus 1, or what they are. So that's really why it seems like it's like we're starting from the middle, or we're going to the middle. It's really the order that really makes sense if you follow it as starting from the beginning of Friday night all the way through the Shabbos day as different malachas come up. Okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to talk about what makes a malacha a malacha. What defines what a malacha is? And I have a handout. I don't have English on the handout, but I'm not going to use most of the Gemaras. I'm actually going to use more of the categories that you're aware of. So, and I just let me give credit. I got many of these sources from a sheet that was done by Adam Friedman. Anybody know Adam Friedman? He grew up in this community, right? And he's actually one of the Avrechim on the YU Kollel now. He's a very clever guy, and I taught him many years ago. Okay. So what is the origin for the malachos for Shabbos? Where does Shabbos come from? Why do we choose these things to do? Why can't you carry? Why can't you light fire? Why can't you writing is a malacha? Why can't you build? What makes something a malacha? What makes something not a malacha? Min HaTorah. And how do we define what they are? So The rule is that we tend to look at malachos that were needed to build the Mishkan. Okay, we look at the malachas that were required to build the Mishkan, and they all, the 39 malachas, play a role in one form or another in the building of the Mishkan itself. Now, there's a major machlokes, and most people say this is it's about building the Mishkan. There is another opinion that is mentioned, which is not about building the Mishkan, but it's about the actual malachas in the Mishkan that went on a daily basis. Okay, and that's mentioned by the Egli Tal, and that's actually a third source that you have. I'm going a little bit out of order. Who quotes from Rav Hai Gaon? This is a very unusual opinion. This is probably like the minority opinion of what the malachos are, but he makes it very clear that this is about what they needed in the malach, in the actual building of, in the actual doing the sacrificial rite, the avoda in the base of Mikdash. And so, for example, if you look in the third source, and where it says Rav Hai Gaon is the double underline about the fourth line there, he says the first 11 malachas talk about preparing. Now, ostensibly, what they're preparing for, they're planting and sowing and plowing and harvesting and bundling. It's ostensibly about preparing the spices that were needed to run the Mishkan, because in coloring the different, spices and dyes mostly, that were needed to color the different fabrics, you needed to process how to make these dyes. You go to Pioneer Village, you can still see them do the same thing, where they'll cook certain organic plants and come up with an extract and so forth. So that's what it normally is. The Gemara will actually present this in a way that seems to follow the order of baking the bread. And the Gemara will actually reflect, and we'll come to that Gemara, not today, we'll come to it in a couple of weeks. And the Gemara says, well, how come, why is it talking about Opheh? The almost last stage should not be Opheh, which is baking. What should it be? If you were cooking something, what would you call it? Not Opheh, which is baking. What's the term you would use for cooking? Bishul. You would say bishul. So the Gemara says, you know what? You're really right. But the Tana of the Mishnah wanted to give you this in the format of preparing bread. Bread's more common, and people relate to it more directly, and bread is the staff of life, perhaps. So the Rav Hai Gaon says, you see, this is not just about preparing for the Mishkan. This was like making the lechem aponim. You had to make it the showbread every week, and a lot of other things which he comes up that were brought, and so for preparing the sacrifices. So there were different karbanos, there were different menachos that the Kohen had to bring, and all of this is about going through the order of preparing not just for dyes, but preparing actually for bread and for wheat and for flour and so forth, which would have been brought as a mincha, which would have been brought by the Kohen, which would have been brought as part of sacrificial rites and so forth. So that's really the minority opinion. Most of the Rishonim say, and this is what we normally hear, that we're talking about preparing to build the Mishkan, to set it up, to make it go. And all the 39 malachos, they will show how they are there. Even, for example, where would they be carrying? So when they had the boards, for example, Levim had, the boards were set up, the boards had to be carried and dismantled, and they would be on wagons. So there's a Rosh Hashanah, there's a Rosh Hashanah, they're carried from one wagon to another wagon. So one after the other, the Gemara seems to say it really has to deal with preparing for the Mishkan. Now, it may be that sometimes there had to be repairs, and things wore out. So let's say you had one of the curtains, and the curtain got a hole in it, so you had to sew it up. Right, or in order to sew it, you needed to rip it more to make an even seam, because it was just a jagged kind of rip. So that's it may be preparing for the Mishkan in between the stops, but it's still preparing about setting up the Mishkan and letting it go. I just want you to be aware there is this minority of opinion, and sometimes people will tell you that's about how the Mishkan ran. Most people say it's not about how the Mishkan was prepared. Where does it come from? So
there are situations where they moved on Shabbos.
No, they never moved on Shabbos. They did not move on Shabbos. Exactly the point that but they did malachos in the sacrificial rite on Shabbos.
Sure.
Right. In other words, when the temple is up, when the Mishkan is up and running, and they're doing the karbanos, there's fire, there's slaughtering. There's bringing menachos, which is baking and so forth. All of this is taking place. These are the exceptions. You daven on Shabbos about bringing the korban musaf. Musaf of Shabbos is about the korban. There's a korban tamid. So they broke Shabbos. I don't want to say they broke Shabbos, but the sacrificial rites are exceptions to the rule about many things you cannot do. However, preparing for the Mishkan, they did not break Shabbos, but these malachos were what were needed to make the Mishkan. You would need to do at one point preparing for the Mishkan, preparing to set it up. You'd have to do each one of the 39 malachos to make it run.
During the week, even during the
during the week. But that's the definition of what malacha is. Now I haven't told you really where it comes from.
Yeah, just because I'm sure you're going to get to understand it later. So there are two. Putting it, I always had the impression it was creating, let's say, the Mishkan in the sense that it needs curtains, so you have to create the curtains, or they had that certain colors, like you just said, right? That's different than assembling it once you have all the components, if you know what I mean. Right?
Well,
so is there, and maybe it'll come up when we
they're both. I think they're both there. Preparing it and getting it ready to assemble it are all part of the same thing, but they're just different pieces. In other words, in order to set up the curtains, you need to have curtains. In order to have curtains, you need to dye them. In order to dye them, you have to go have plants. In order to have plants, you have to plant and.
I was thinking more of the example that you brought up because we mentioned it a few weeks ago about transferring from one wagon to the other, right? So, in a sense, the first time you actually put up the Mishkan, I don't know what you would do.
So some are going to be closer to the end, and some will be closer to the beginning of the process. In fact, when we go through the 39 malachas, and we're not doing as you see this moment, you'll see they tend to run in an order of different units. The ones at the end are clearly closer to the end of the process and setting it up. But setting it up, you've got to. It's starting from the first ingredients. This is not like you're the final purveyor and going into the supermarket. It's like
first part, not the second.
It's like saying that you want to buy apples. You go into Sobeys, you go into No Frills. No, you want to buy apples. You got to go first, plow the field, plant the tree, plant the apple seed, prune it, and so forth, and then water it and harvest it, collect them, pile them up. All of these are going to be malachas that eventually you're going to get the apple.
Right.
So that's how it's viewed. It's not viewed as the end user, the last stage. It's really viewed all the way through. And you'll see we'll go through them. There are about 4 or 5 different groupings of the malachos. The first 11 are about cooking and baking, and then it goes on to trapping and skins. If you want to have skins that were covering the Mishkan, you had to catch the animal. Then you had to shech the animal. Then you have to skin the animal. Then you have to prepare the skin, cut the skin. So all of this goes along. But what I'm trying to stress, this is about, and coming back to what Hank said, this is about the way it was prepared. Preparing the Mishkan was not breaking Shabbos, but defining what is a malacha for Shabbos is defined about building the Mishkan. Now this sounds like very outlandish, because Shabbos is Shabbos, building a Mishkan is building a Mishkan. So the answer is, and this is the first source, and that's probably where we should have started, is in the beginning of Parshas Vayakhel, chapter 35. This is after the Mishkan has been built and the raw utensils are there. Moshe actually has Moshe tells the people to bring what they need to make the Mishkan. Before it says and talks about the Mishkan, it says Vayakel Moshe called das Meisrael. Moshe calls the people together. It says Eila Dvarim Shetzivah Hashem L'Sasam. These are the things that Hashem has commanded you. And then there are 2 or 3 psukim that deal with Shabbos. Sheish Yomim Ta'aseh Malacha, do Malacha for 6 days. Yom HaShvi is Kodesh, Shabbos on Hashem. They printed the kufs and placed it. Hey, right? Kalos Malacha, you can't do Malacha. It's a capital offense. Lo Sevaroish B'chol Moshvosechem, you cannot do fire in your homes. Which, by the way, the Gemara learns in the Moshvosechem, you can't do it in the Beis HaMikdash. You can for the sacrificial order. And then after those 2 psukim, which talk about not doing Melacha. Right? It doesn't really define what malacha is except for Eish. It doesn't tell you what the malachos are. The only one that's singled out is not making fire. All the others, we don't know what they are. Sure. So the next thing is it goes to talk about the Mishkan. Vayom Hashem al kodas me'Yisrael lemor zeh hadavar asher tzivah Hashem lemor k'chu meidchem truma l'Hashem. Everybody should give truma Hashem zav v'kesem nechoshes tcheles argaman. All the things that they should give to build the Mishkan. That people then run to give, and Moshe said that's enough. And then it recounts in Parshas Vayakhel all the utensils of the Mishkan, how they were actually built, after you heard about Menshuma. And then in Pekudei it tells you all about the vestments for Aaron HaKohen. And then finally, at the end of Pekudei, it's all put together. So you see that the building of the Mishkan and the continuation of the Psukim, it talks about making malacha. and Malacha is mentioned. In fact, if you look down in source 6, you have the continuation. It's not pasuk after pasuk, but this source 1 is 1 to 5. Source 6 is already 30, 31, 32, and now it talks about Betzalel is going to put it together. So God gave him wisdom to know Tvuna, B'das, Ubechol Malacha, and he's going to do Bechol Maleches Machshavas. He's going to do all kinds of Malacha that requires intelligence. So Malacha comes up in the Mishkan, Malacha comes up in Shabbos. So the Gemara makes the connection, or the oral law says that's the same Malacha. What was needed to the Malacha to build the Mishkan was what defines Malacha for Shabbos. I'll say it again because this is the key to it. Whatever kind of Malacha, work, labor, creative labor was required to build the actual Mishkan is the same definition of Malacha that is prohibited on Shabbos, that you can't do. It's the same word. It doesn't say avoda, it says Malacha. That's a very specific term. So in fact, when it's all together, it says v'hamalacha dayam. The work was finished. So the term malacha tends to be related to holy days, not to do, and tends to be related to building the Mishkan. So the connection is very simple in our own minds. Therefore, what is one is the other. What was required to build the Mishkan becomes the definition of labor, even if you don't think it's the hardest thing in the world to do. But you had to for example, where's their writing in the Mishkan? You say, well, they took notes. They didn't take notes. On the boards. When they put the boards together, they determined which board was 1, which board was 2. Like you put up your sukkah, if you have boards, you put them together, they come together and come apart. And so therefore, the Gemara learns from this, that in order to write, you have to have at least 2 letters or 2 numbers, two figures, one next to the other to be writing. If I wrote 1 letter, that's not ksiva. Right? If I wrote a scrabble, a graphic design, that's not ksiva, that's not writing. It may be a different kind of malacha, maybe inscribing or something else, because they were inscribing on certain things, but that's not ksiva. Now, if I erased nor to write, so that would they may have made a mistake. The Gemara's conjectures about numbering maybe one board to the other board, so they had to erase it and write it again. So it's not erasing, but erasing only in order to write. It's not destructive, it's just helping create it. So all of this goes back to this. So that's really where it comes from. I told you, then you have this minority opinion that says not only about building the Mishkan, it's also about the day-to-day working of the Mishkan itself. Okay? So, right. So if you look, for example, we'll come to this Rashi in source number 2. The Rashi says when the Gemara is going to talk about, we actually may even come to it today, we'll see. The Gemara talks about the order of the Mishkan, and it talks about the first 11 malachos. That really is about planting and planting and plowing and harvesting and watering and so forth. So all of that is really, it puts it in the framework at the end about baking. So Rashi points out, lo have b'mishkan, when the Gemara says it wasn't the Mishkan, lo shaykh el b'pas, because some of the 7 items are dealing with bread, upat lo shaykh b'lechs Mishkan. Bread was not used for building of the Mishkan. When did they have bread? After the Mishkan was up and running.
Sure.
They bake the bread, and they're going to use it for the showbread, the lechem apanim. Aval kulu kamaita have b'samamonim shel tseva. The first list of 11, which I know we haven't gone to yet, are all about the dyes, some of the samamonim, the herbs of dyeing, tcheles, argama, and tolad shani. All of these were different colors that we used to color the different coverings and curtains and covers in the Mishkan itself. And the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to ask that, why do we do that, and so forth and so on, okay? And the same thing is going to be coming about, if you look right below that, goes a semer, in between 2 and 3, right? So this talks about one of the malachas says you can't shear sheep. Well, what happened with shearing sheep? Because all these malachos were related to tzemer in making the wool that was needed for different curtains. They had to shear it, they had to comb it, they had to dye it. So a whole bunch of malachas get related to using the wool because wool was prepared for some of the coverings. You have coverings that are dyed with animal dyes. You have coverings, and the coverings are made with skins, and there are coverings that are made with wool. Okay. And there's the same thing in 4. Now, so that's really in terms of the origins of what the malachos are. So it sounds outlandish, but it really makes sense if you look at the psukim in Parshas Vayakhel, how they go back to back. The next thing, I'm going to give you a certain basic vocabulary, so we get to it, you'll know what it is. We talk about in Shabbos toldos and avos and toldos, and we saw a little bit about this in the first parak. right? So an Av is a Malacha that existed in the building of the Mishkan, one of the 39, right? And let's give an example: gozes, like shearing, shechting, planting, plowing, harvesting. So all of these were called the Avos Malachos, and there are 39 different categories. Toldos were not in the Mishkan, but are very similar to what was in the Mishkan. And the rule is easier to explain than the particulars, because it looks like when you get to the particulars, there are many exceptions to the rule. But the rule is that an Av is an action, but it also has a purpose, a function for it. It's called a Pu'ula and a Tachlit, or Tachlit. There's an actual way you do something, and then there's the purpose for it. So let me give you an example. Plowing. So plowing is what is plowing all about? I'm taking the dirt and I'm digging it over, so it'll be easier to plant. What would happen if I simply made a furrow? I made a furrow in the ground. I made a trough in the ground.
You want to cover the seed.
Well, it depends what it's. But even if I'm not going to cover the seed, that may be close enough to be a tolda. Right, there may be different derivatives that are not really prohibited, but that would be similar. The tach, or that's what I'm saying. The exceptions are the devil is in the details, but you've got the purpose and you've got the action. The purpose here is to stir up the dirt. You want to use the dirt for something. You know, in the case of plowing, you're using the dirt to cover the seeds. But in the case of digging the furrow, maybe you want the dirt to put somewhere else.
Okay.
Right, or maybe you want the dirt to be softened up. Or now, if you want just simply to dig a furrow, and you don't want the dirt, let's say I dig the furrow and I throw the dirt away. So it looks like the same thing as plowing, but it's really different, because the purpose is not to use the dirt that's there. The dirt is being removed. I'm digging a furrow. Plowing is not really a furrow. I'm just giving you a general example. So what makes a tolda of an Av is it's very similar to the Av, but it itself was not in the Mishkan. Okay, when you get further away from that, there are a lot of extensions which are rabbinic, and those are going to be similar or concerned. One may lead to another, and so forth. So that's going to be a different category. So a tolda is a doraisa. And an Av is a doraisa. They're both going to be minat Torah. Though they both the punishment is minat Torah, right?
It's different punishments for each.
I don't think it's a different punishment. For a tolda? For a tolda, he stops being a korban chatas.
Less than that?
I don't think so. I'll maybe. You know what? I don't know. Okay, I'll look it up.
So, but even though the tolda is the raisa, it's just harder to recognize.
But it's harder. It's not exactly what was in the Mishkan, right? And the other important, as opposed to a drabanan, that will be an extension that you won't be korban chatas. The punishment will be less. It won't be malchus, whatever it is. So that's important. The other thing is you cannot be subjected to double jeopardy. Thank you, double jeopardy. So that if you do an Av, you do the tolda at the same time or one after the other, you can't be charged twice.
It's the same category.
Same category. It's the same category.
Told of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You can't be charged for. I guess the similarity would be it's really wrong. You can't be charged for going through a red light and going through speeding at the same time with the same. You could be actually today, but that's that's because they all fall under the traffic act. So that may not apply. You can get multiple charges, but here within the act now you can do two malachas perhaps at the same time. Right, so you will have all kinds of permutations. The Gemara where you're doing Malacha 1 and Malacha 2, Malacha 3. You can therefore be charged up to 39 different charges, different chatases, different karbans, different malchus, whatever it is. But if it's the same Av and the same Tolda, it's going to be you can't do them both together. Yeah. So that's a Gemara that comes up actually in Masechet Bava Kama. It comes up another place as well. Now just take a look at it. Gabi Shabbos. It's talking about different malachas. Avos malachas abarim chasirachas is source number 5. 5. Avos mechlaldika toldos. There are avos, there are toldos. So the Gemara says toldos sem kiyotzmen. The toldos like the avs. The Gemara says loshna av gets a korban chatas. Loshna tolda gets a korban chatas. Loshna av gets skila. Loshna tolda gets skila. They get the same punishment. They're the same thing. So ma'iko bein av latolda. What's the real difference? In nafkamina, di'ilu avad shtei avos bahadei adadei o shtei toldos bahadei adadei mechayva kol chada v'chada. If you did two avos, you planted and you planted and plowed at the same time, okay? Or I can't think of an example offhand, but you did two malachas together, you'd be responsible for two. You did two toldos, told of one malacha and told of another malacha, you'd be chay for two. Mechayva kol chada v'chada. V'ilo avad tolda didei lo mechayva elachada. If you did an av and its own tolda, you're only going to be charged with once, okay? And then the Gemara says, well, there is one other opinion, which we don't paskin like, Rabbi Eliezer, who says, you're mechayev atolda b'makamav. Once again, a minority, a very small minority opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, if you did a tolda and an av, you charge twice. Right, it's two. So I might correlate av, I might correlate tolda. What do we care whether it's an av or tolda? You can be charged with both of them. So the Gemara says, hach tahav mishkan chashiva correlate av. Those who were in the mishkan and chashiv. There should be this machlokas in the gear says hach tahav mishkan uchashiva or hach tahav mishkan were chashiva. That's an av. Hach lo have mishkan chashiva correlate tolda. If it didn't exist exactly this way in the mishkan, it's called a tolda. So it may simply be a categorization. For us, practically on the ground today, it's not that important whether you do a tolda, whether you do an av. Right? It's going to have the same significance. It'd be different if it's only a rabbinic prohibition. But in terms of the Gemara's discussion, it's very important to determine what is an av, what is the tolda. I don't want to sound like this is a very brutal mesechta. We're concerned how many aveira stamps you get. You're going to get one or two. But that's the categorization process of what the Gemara is. Okay? Now, so far so good?
Just a quick, a tolda and an of is all midiraisa.
Yes. Correct, except that the av existed exactly like that in the Mishkan. The tolda is not like that, but it has the same tachlis and the same pu'ula. Okay, those are the key words, pu'ula, tachlis and pu'ula. What gets complicated is trying to apply that in specific cases. You'll say, oh, this looks different. This looks like a different pu'ula. And the Gemara says, no, it's really the same. Or it looks like the purpose is a little bit different. No, it's really the same purpose. Or vice versa.
Close enough. Yeah.
It's close enough.
These days, new toldas come up all the time.
Maybe
electricity, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe electricity. Yeah, the question actually comes up: what is the malacha of electricity? That's a very complicated malacha. What really does it fall under? Sure. It's not that clear, right? It may actually, in some cases, it might be a drabanan. It might be a drabanan of eish because it's sparking when you connect things. It might be what's called makah b'patish, which is the 39th malacha. I think the 39th or 38th, which is like completing something. And that's a very complicated malacha. Not that it's complicated; it becomes very amorphous. Has large application. It's the completion of any final measure of anything. So, for example, if you build a house, it's bona, but you put the last nail in, that becomes makah b'patish, the final hammer. That's a separate malacha. So anytime that you finish something off, it's called the 12th parak deals with makah b'patish, which is like plastic. It's like silly putty. It gets pulled into a lot of places. As opposed to bona, you build something. I build a utensil. I build a house. I build something. I understand what bona is. I know what kosev is, right? But in terms of makah b'patish, that's complicated. So, but there are examples where you could find something that could be a total. Yes. Okay. Now question. Next key word is what's called Malachas Machsheves. That's about the 2/3 of the way down. Okay, Malachas Machsheves means that you need to have your intention to doing a malacha. Okay, if you don't intend to do a malacha, it's not a malacha. There has to be some intellectual, cognitive ability to do the malacha. So, for example, we say people lean against the light switch. They lean against the wall and they kick off the light switch. Right? And you'll say, oh, that's shogeg. He didn't intend. No, it's not even shogeg.
He had no intention.
He had no intention to do it, right? It's what's going to be called misasek. It just happened. You weren't even involved in it. In other words, it just happened by virtue of something that you didn't even think was going to occur. So it requires some type of mental ability. Now, what happens if you think you want to do A and you do B? Right, that's going to be a part of it. Or what happens if you didn't want to do something but it has to happen? So we're going to talk about that in a moment. But the general rule is what's called Meleches Machsheves, and a lot of rules come down from that. And that really goes back to when we started to show the Psukim in source 1 and source 6. So source 6 is the continuation after dealing with Shabbos and Moshe calling for the people to bring the stuff to the Mishkan. It tells us who's Bitzal ben Uri. And once again, this used the term Malacha. But together with Malacha, it says he's got Chochmah, Tvuna, Das, he's Lachshov Machshavos, he can deal with Zav, Kesem, Nechoshes, and he wants to do all Meleches Machsheves, all intellectual thinking work, because the Mishkan was not a hodgepodge. It was well orchestrated, well designed, it required knowledge of architecture, knowledge of compounding, all kinds of quality building. You're building something that's going to last, right? So therefore, this connection about a Betzalel, who's going to build it with Meleches Machsheves, build the Mishkan, and its connection to Shabbos, which is right before it, gets together. So the Gemara, so Rashi quotes in Maseches Be'an, the source number 7, that Meleches Machsheves is Meleches Umanos, is a skilled labor, which means intentional. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to go for a PhD in astrophysics. Because Shabbos is next to building the Mishkan in Parshas Vayakel, that sources 1 and 6. And then building the Mishkan, it's Meleches Machsheves. And Rashi says the same thing in Masechet Chagiga, Daf Yudam and Beis, is source number 8. Shemachshava Melechet Machsheves, Shemalacha Chashva B'daitov Netkavin Lo. You intended to do it. Right? And what will happen if you didn't intend to do it, or if it had to happen, you knew it's going to happen, right? But you say I didn't intend to do it. Like what if you lean against the switch and you run your hand up against the wall? Said I didn't really want the switch to go on. Well, you know if you run your hand up against that part of the wall and you're watching your hand, when it runs up against the switch, you're going to flip the switch. Can you actually say, I did not intend to do that? I wanted just to, get the mosquito. That's probably also wrong. Okay. So that's Meleches Machsheves. Right? So that's a key rule that comes up in a number of subcategories that will play themselves out all over Masechet Shabbos. One of which is Malacha Sheina Tzricha L'Gufa, and that's the next category. Malacha Sheina Tzricha L'Gufa is as follows, and I gave you the example about the ditch. And this is we're going to see this, by the way, on Ayin Daled Amud Beis as well. He quotes it here from Chagiga, only because they put the continuation in. That this is a case that comes up. I'm sorry.
I said we studied Chagiga. I'm trying to remember what we.
So the Gemara Masechet Chagiga was talking about that there are things that are standing on a hair. And they're very difficult. And one of the examples it gave was Shabbos. The Gemara says, Shabbos? You're telling me that Shabbos has no basis? Shabbos, we just read the Psukim, right? And it talks about Eish and so forth. So the Gemara says, no, that's dealing with something called Davar Sheina Tzricha L'Gufa. That there's really no basis for it. What's it now? Then explains what a Malacha Sheina Tzricha L'Gufa is. And the case is, you just see it's the first line in source number 9. So the Gemara says, Hilchos Shabbos Michtav Ksivit. So Shabbos is written. You can't say that there's no basis for it. It's actually saying it's even less. There's certain things that don't even have an origin for it. And one of which is Shabbos. The Gemara says Shabbos has got an origin. We know Shabbos. Shabbos comes up in a number of places. It means Malacha Sheina Tzricha L'Gufa, which is the Amar Rabbi Abba, Hachofer Guma b'Shabbos Vein Tzarech L'Afara. You're digging a ditch on Shabbos, and you want the dirt for something else. So you dig the ditch.
You don't want the ditch, you want the dirt.
You want the dirt, right? That's the example. So potter aleha. So then you're potter, you're not chayev. Potter means, by the way, the term potter, what does potter mean? Potter usually aval asr. It means it's rabbinically prohibited. Doesn't mean don't try this at home on Shabbos, but it means it's not a Torah level prohibition. So potter means you're not going to be charged, but you can't do it. If I wanted to say that something would be okay to do altogether, I wouldn't use potter. What would I use? Not potter. Mutar, I'd say mutar, right? Mutar and asr.
Mutar, asr, potter.
Mutar, potter, and asr, potter, and mutar. That's how it works in 95% of the cases. There was asr. Asr means asr or chayev. Chayev, I guess, is a good term. Chayev. Chayav.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Chayav. The term is going to be used chayav. Chayav. The opposite of you get punishment. Right? You get malchus, you get chatos, right? That's chayav. The opposite of chayav is potter.
No, potter of alasser, you said.
Right, potter of alasser, correct. It's like saying the cop pulls you over and says, you know what, I'm going to give you a warning.
That's your bonon.
I'm going to give you a warning. Not on you. It was wrong that you were speeding, but I'm going to give you a warning because I like you, okay? Because you're a yid, okay? And because you're only doing a couple of kilometers over. and because it's Christmas and it's a holiday spirit and yada yada yada. You're wearing your seatbelt and you're not drunk, okay? So therefore, I'm going to let you off. So that's pater avalasa. Then the final one, the easiest level, is mutar. You can do it. Not even a prohibition on a rabbinic level. So there is a small number, just to confuse you a little bit, there is a small number of cases in Shas which pater means not just pater avalasa, pater aval mutar. Okay, but that's a really tiny percentage. Pater means pater, you're not charged, and you even can do it. That's like 1%.
Why do you have to say that? Just say mutter.
Well,
I don't mean to be like,
okay,
fine.
Okay, that's I said. It's like you probably it's like 1%. 1%. It's like 0.1%. Okay.
Archie.
Be quiet. Okay.
That's okay. We ask the questions. We'll just like
1%.
right, whatever it is. But usually pater means pater lavas. But that's important for the Gemara to know that it's not a Torah level prohibition. Right? Sure. And you're not going to be charged from that Torah, okay? So you're not going to be charged. So therefore, then the Gemara says this follows Rabbi Shimon. Okay, it follows Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon is the one who says the Amar Malacha shein tzrich legufa pater aleha. If you do a malacha and you didn't follow the exact format, you didn't want the purpose of the malacha.
Right.
Right. So in this case, normally plowing is you're plowing over the dirt. You're making you're using it, and you wanted to soften the land that's there, and by softening the land, you're digging it up to plow. That's what it is. The land stays there that you can plant. If you take the dirt away, right, for another purpose, that loses its purpose. So, for example, this could come up. For example, making an irrigation trench, right, where they take it up, they take the dirt out to unstop the irrigation trench, and they throw the dirt out on the side. So that's actually a machlokus between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Don't try this at home, so to speak. So Rabbi Shimon says all malacha she'en tzrich legufa is pater, and Rabbi Yehuda says malacha she'en tzrich legufa is chayav. So then the Gemara says in the next line, we'll just do this here, and it's not that complicated. Afilo tema Rabbi Yehuda, who says that malacha she'en tzrich legufa is chayav. Normally, if I do it and I don't want the dirt, it's okay. But here, hacha, in this case, it's even worse. Not only don't I not want the dirt, it's makalkalhu. I'm ruining what I have. I have a floor in the living room. It's a hard floor, a hard dirt floor, not hardwood, a hard dirt floor, and I dig a trench. Or I have a field, and I'm not plowing. I dig a trench because you need the dirt somewhere else. So when I dig the trench, it's not plowing, and it's not building. I'm ruining it because what I'm left with in my living room is a trough. I'm left within my field also a trough, which is bad for the cows who are pulling the wagon or pulling the plow or walking through. It's a trough. It's like a hole in the road. So in such a case, even Rabbi Yehuda will say that it's pater, because even Rabbi Yehuda will say malacha she'en tzrich legufa, that is mekalkel, that's destructive, is going to be pater. So malacha she'en tzrich legufa is usually a machloka between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Comes up in a number of Gemaras. But if it's destructive, it's going to be all the more reason to make it pater, and that's why the Gemara says. By the way, that's the last line from the Masechet Chagiga, which the Gemara says kahararim atluim b'saira. Right, these are the mountains that are tied. They're hanging on a hair. That's the hair. Meleches machsheves asra Torah, because this is based upon the understanding of the word meleches machsheves. Doesn't say directly you have to be a Betzalel when you go to Shabbos. Right, but it says, but the connection is because if Betzalel was an intellectual, anything that you do in working is got to be intellectually part of what you want to do, like they did in the Mishkan. So that's what it means. Okay, and if you just turn the page over, Meleches Machsheves on this Rashi on the page just points out the first 4 or 5 words. Right, Machshava Chashva b'daitov v'netkaven la. Meleches Machsheves means you have to have in mind to do it kavana. V'zeh lo netkaven la lebinyan zeh. You really intend to build this ditch. That wasn't your intention. What was your intention here?
To take the dirt.
To take the dirt. You wanted the dirt. The fikach pater. Okay, and that's where it really comes from Meleches Machsheves. And then Rashi goes to explain it a little more.
Just to make sure that I understand Machsheves, right? One more time.
Yeah.
And we actually had that in criminal law, although now they're trying to change it all the way, which is not only have to do it, you have to intend to actually commit the crime in some sense, right?
Except so, if you knew it and you forgot it. Like if you intended, for example, let's say I intended to make a fire, but I forgot it's Shabbos. or I forgot I intended to make a fire, knew it's Shabbos, but I forgot I cannot make a fire on Shabbos, that's still intent. Do you agree, counselor?
Well, I'm trying to see what that's, I'm trying to get clear what this intent was.
Intent means I didn't intend to do the Malacha.
Anything in a certain sense. Well,
no, I did intend to do it.
The furrow you gave before, that's a machshev, and I wanted the dirt. I didn't want the
That's
furrow.
right. I didn't want the furrow. I didn't want the dirt to be there.
I still wanted to do something, but I...
Correct. So that's why that's a machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Okay. I did want to do something,
right,
but I did not want to do exactly what you would normally be doing on a Shabbos prohibited activity, which is to plow over the land and keep the land there. I simply wanted the dirt.
Right.
I wanted the dirt for something else.
Right, for something else, right.
But the fact and the fact is that I did something that looks like a malacha, but it's not really the template of what the malacha and Shabbos is, which is plowing.
Right.
Which is about turning the dirt over and leaving it there with the rest of the dirt, making it soft. I didn't make it soft, I removed it. The upshot is I got a hole in my living room.
Right, but that's because Rabbi Yehuda says it's makalkel,
okay. So there's another example where it's not makalkel. The Rabbi Shimon would still say it's still butter.
That's the one I want to be clear. So you wanted to do something, but this wasn't this that I wanted to do. So I'm butter according to Rabbi Shimon.
Right.
Let's say.
Give you another example. Maybe this will help clarify this. Another example of malacha she'eina tzrich legufa, and maybe this is the paradigm example, is where you have a dead body in a house. Okay, and a Kohen wants to go into the house. Let's say, for example, a person who's tahar wants to go into the house. We can relate to it more directly with a Kohen. Kohen wants to come home to sleep. Kohen wants to go to his house. There's a dead body in there. What would you do? So if you take the body out, right, you're carrying, right? Because you're taking from in the house to outside the house. So that's not a malacha that you're intending to do carrying. It may be rabbinically prohibited. It's going to be rabbinically prohibited. But in terms of carrying, the case of carrying we had was I'm inside, I want to put it outside. Right. The Ani wants to get his hand out. He puts his hand in, gets the blechem. The balabais wants to put his hand out to give it to the Ani. That's I'm trying to transfer an object.
Right.
Here my intention is to make the house clear from Tumah, except the only way I can do it is I take the body out. So the malacha, this is actually a better example. This is the paradigm example. Malacha, she'eina tzricha leguf. I'm not doing it for its purpose. Right. The malacha is I'm clearly doing the malacha of carrying. But the intention is for a different kind of intention.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Perfect.
That's a good example. So that's the machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, whether that would be considered pater or chayav. And that's the perfect example actually for it. Why? Because my intention, you guys say, but your intention is to carry the body out. No, my intention is really to make sure the person can be in the house. Okay, so that's called malacha she'eina tzrich legufa. I'm trying to remove it, and that's the only way I can figure out how to remove it, so I do it. So that's the example that's given, and the full case is not given in 12 and 13. It just says esameis b'mito. You're carrying out that you're chayiv, and Rabbi Shimon says you're pater. That's the case we're talking about. The Gemara explains it. It's not the full quote. And then Rabbi Shimon says afilu b'mei shalem. Even if you take a full body out, why davi malacha she'eina tzrich legufa? And malacha she'eina tzrich legufa, you're going to be having malacha she'eina tzrich legufa. The Tzon Labala, he didn't do intentionally to move the body. He didn't want to move the body. The body is not. He doesn't really care where the body is, and therefore it's not malachas machsheves according to Rabbi Shimon. Okay, that's the better example. So it has. So once again, it goes back to malachas machsheves. The other case, the other thing that's going to come up. And this is going to come up almost with as much frequency as davar malacha she'eina tzrich legufa. It's called davar she'eina miskavein. I didn't intend to do this at all. Right? The example of malacha she'eina tzrich legufa is I did intend. My purpose was not for doing the malacha. Right? I intended to get the body out. Can't say I didn't intend. My purpose was to clean the house for tumah. So let's say davar she'eina miskavein. Let me give you a good example. The example is about, let's say, this is a practical example. I am moving, lawn furniture in my backyard. Okay, and I dig out into the backyard. Okay, I don't really want to dig out into the backyard. So what would you call that? It's called davar she'eina miskavein. I did not intend to do it. So even if I did it, I didn't do malacha. My intention was to take the lawn chair from here and move it over there. I wanted to put it under the shade. And it's not carrying. It's in an Eruv. It's in my backyard. It's a chair, and I can pick it up. It's a lightweight chair. So that's called davar she'eina miskavein. I had absolutely no intention to do it whatsoever. The example the Gemara gives is about a an agola of a child, like think of this as a baby carriage or some kind of wagon. And it's right now. It's hard for us to imagine our wagons are going to dig into the dirt. Think of this as early spring when everything's melting and everything's really gooey. Okay, so once again, that would be a davar she'eino miskaven. Now you're going to say, oh, but it's going to happen, right? Well, you know you're going to pull the wagon through the mud. It's going to happen. The answer is it's going to depend. What I just said is really the giveaway to the next term, which is called psik reisha. If I know it's really going to happen. There's no way to pull the wagon through the mud. There's no way to move this chair in my backyard because it's heavy metal, solid construction. The table, and I'm only one person, so I can't move this table across the lawn except by dragging it. And I know when I drag it, because I'm a schlepper, it's going to make a ditch, right? So that's called psik reisha, and I'll explain psik reisha in a moment. That is going to override davar she'eino miskaven. It doesn't really override it. It's a coda. Because you could not have done this without knowing it was going to happen. You know if you take the wagon and pull it through the mud, it's going to make a ditch. You know if you move the chair, it's going to make a charitz. If it's that heavy.
Right.
If it's that heavy. And therefore, I can't claim I didn't intend to do it. Yes?
What about snow? Would it apply?
Yeah.
If you walk in snow, you're going to make a hole in the ground.
Well, so what are you doing actually? You're making a hole in the snow. You're not making a hole in the ground, really.
No.
You're making a hole. It's snow. It's going to melt. Okay. You can walk in the snow. Okay. Yes, you can walk. Yes, you can walk in the snow. Yes. Okay. And if it's dangerous, you can maybe shovel the snow even. Okay. So and you can salt the walks for sure. Okay. So at any rate, but that's snow. Right, and it's that's different than digging a ditch in the ground. Okay, now you say so how do you know for sure? So the answer is you'll know. You have a good sense. Now, what does psik reisha mean? So psik reisha is a one of these wonderful Talmudic terms, and it's like a rhetorical question. Psik reisha v'lo yamus. If you chop the head of a chicken off, is it not going to die? And the example in the Gemara, and here's where it gets a little bit gross, is actually No, it's not running around. No, that's normal. It's actually, you wanted to give the kids something to play with.
Oh, yeah.
So what would you give them? So you give them the head of a chicken. But the only head of a chicken is attached to a chicken. So you think of tchotchkes they give to kids, right? Today they give candies. I don't know. Whatever it is, they give Lego sets.
They didn't have much of those.
They didn't have much in those days. So you want to give the head of the... I guess this was what they did with the head of a chicken. They recycled everything. What else would you do with the head of a chicken? You can't process it. There's nothing there. It's a chicken brain, okay? So therefore, how could you give the head of the chicken to the kid if psik reisha, you're going to cut the head off a lo yamus? It's a rhetorical question. Obviously it will kill. So you can't say, I only wanted to give the kid the head. So that becomes the paradigm example. It's, of course, a silly example, but it just shows you, by the way, what the kids were playing with. Okay? Probably mummified,
so
petrified.
So the reisha here is really a rosh.
Psik reisha, yes, it means rosh. Psik reisha, psik from break, it's Aramaic. Psik reisha, tafsik at the rosh, not tafsik. V'lo yamus, psik reisha v'lo yamus. So that becomes the term that is halachically used all the time in the Gemara, psik reisha. That if you can't do a certain act without it will occur something else that is prohibited, then even if you didn't intend to do the prohibited act, it's going to be prohibited. So the example, and the perfect example is the heavy kind of lawn chair. Right, so you have this kind of stuff that's made of plastic, you can pick it up. If you got the real quality stuff that you spent a lot of money on, and you can't move it, you need 2 or 3 people. 2 or 3 people move it, it's fine. You both pick it up. But one person is going to schlep it, really, you're going to make a mess of it, okay? And you make a mess of the dirt as well. So that's what it means. Right, so... Okay, and that also gets related, by the way, to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon at certain points. If you look in 17, the Shulchan Aruch says, "Davar she'eino miskaven mutar v'hu shlo yehei psik reisha." Provided it's not a psik reisha, hilka gorer adam mita kitzei v'safsal. You can schlep a bed, a chair, or safsal is a bench, ben gedolim, ben ketanim, big or small. Uvavad shlo yiskaven lasos chritz. provided you don't want to make a ditch. Umutu l'rabei tzabayis, and you want to sweep the house. This is dealing here with a dirt floor. And when you swept the floor, you probably kind of scratches onto the floor itself. You're not intending to make ditches. You wanted the dust not to be kicked up. So if you happen to make a ditch, it's going to be davar shalom miskaven. Okay, and the example is, and the last one we'll do is number 18. The Rambam tells you what psik reisha is in all its glory. Asa maseh v'nasis beglol malacha shavade te'aseh b'shvil oto maseh. If you do an act A, and because of Act A, on account of it, Act B will occur because of Act A. Even though you did not intend to do it, but it will have to happen. Because you know it's not possible that B won't be done. If you want to take the head of a chicken, the head of a bird, doesn't like chicken, for a kid to play with, and you cut off its head on Shabbat, even though you didn't want to do shchita, which is a prohibited activity, but the death will come through it, and okay, so in fact, one of the things the Gemara talks about is where this comes up is about the chala zone, making the chila zone, right? Which we don't know what it is exactly, but many of us believe it's actually the sea snail trunculus, murex trunculus, and actually what they had to do is if you read the Psil Tchela site, they had to extract the gland from which the Tchela's dye was then processed. So the way they would extract it is they would actually knock a hole into the shell, and if you were a clever enough guy and you were the artisan, you know how to extract the gland. The reality was, if you extracted the gland, eventually the animal will die. It's a tiny shell, but it's part of the existence of the animals. But however, so it looks like a psik reisha. So the Gemara says it's not, why, and it gives other reasons why it's prohibited, not for killing it. The Gemara says we really don't want the animal to die. So you want the animal to live, because as long as the animal is alive, then it'll give a better kind of color from the gland of itself. So there's something else that I didn't even get into, which is called psik reisha de lo nichale. If in other words, if you know that you do A, it's going to lead to B, but B is actually something very bad that you don't want to happen. You don't want to happen. So then it overrides the fact that it will happen. It's negative that will happen. So you have an action that you want to do. That's the davar of you want to do it, but it's going to be, you don't want B to happen, but B will happen. That's prohibited. But B will happen, and B will be bad when it happens. So that you don't even want B to happen, but it'll be a negative thing. And the Gemara gives all kinds of examples about what is psik reisha dil lo nichale lo noach lo. Okay, it's get a little complicated, but at least gives you the basic terms. So the terms that you have, and this is your working vocabulary, is going to be melechas masheves, avos and toldos, malacha sheina tzricha legufa, that's digging the ditch. Or this is about, the other example was about the body in the house you want out for the mace. Davar sheina miskavein, that you didn't intend to do it, which is fine. You didn't intend to occur, and psik reisha, you didn't intend to occur, but it did occur. It has to occur. Okay. So keep that sheet handy. We may come up with it. Now, the next thing I want to do give with you, so I want to give you a cheat sheet. Like cheat sheet? Cheat sheet. Okay.
No test.
There's no test. Okay.
Really
This actually is it's an excellent sheet. It's the best sheet I found. These are the 39 malachos. Okay. Put this in your pocket or something. Okay, so it's not really. It's a good list. I'll tell you why. Because not only does it translate it for you, okay, and they give it transliterated. They don't give you the actual meaning what it is. Okay.
There are 40.
Okay, there are 40. So someone pointed out there are 40. There's 40 because one of them is 29 and 28. The Gemara will say is really the same thing. Tanning and salting. So the Gemara says they're really, the first it says it's they're two of the 39, and it says no, it's really the same thing. It's one of the 39, and then they have to add a number 40 at the very end. That by the way, is out of whack. Really, number 40 goes together with the parts about leather. But here's the key to this list. It gives you a good working definition. If you actually want to be a scholar, it will tell you where the Gemara talks about in greater detail. We're going to list them all in the Mishnah that we're going to do, but it tells you where the real Gemaras are that talk about them. It also organizes them the way they are in the Mishnah, and it's a very clear way to make them understood. So you'll see some of them are a little more obscure what exactly they are. By the way, there's one other term that we should use. There are sometimes two malachos that are the same. It's called, I didn't give this to you as a term, it's called me'ein malacha achas. There are two things that the Gemara will refer to as an of, the same of, with two different names. I'll give you one example, because it's going to come up right away. Zoreya and Notea. I plant the seed, and I plant the tree. Okay? So they are the same term. It's the same malacha, except one is for trees and one is for seeds. The difference is, if I plant a tree, I only plant it once. If I plant the seed, I got to replant it every year, right? Seeds for wheat, vegetables, growths, and so forth. But it's really the same malacha. Notea may be a different way that I'm taking care of it. Notea means I have a sapling already. So whereas I'm planting a seed. So sometimes you find two malachas that will come together, and there'll be a number of examples where the Gemara will say, the following four malachas are one malacha, the same malacha. And some of them will be toldos, and some will be so similar that they're called two variations on the same of. Okay? Now, what's here important about this sheet that you have, the cheat sheet, is the first 11 malachos. And you'll see this is not simply randomly put together. First 11 malachos are all about planting stuff to be able to prepare the samamonim, which are the herbs, for dyes, for coloring. That's really what it was there, because there's a lot of coloring that goes on. Most of it, by the way, is from these animal dyes. The chalazon is the exception, or the chilazon is the exception, which was, of course, this tcheles, this royal blue that is from this animal, right? This little snail. By the way, there are other...
Argamon also.
Argamon comes from what?
Argamon is purple.
Argamon comes from also tcheles. Different process, I think.
Okay, maybe.
I think
maybe.
so.
Okay, could be. But the first 11 are about planting. You see where number...
No, sorry. It's a different mollusk, a different one, something else. I can't remember the name.
Maybe, could be. So now here, well, just to give you the on the cheat sheet, 10 and 11, you see really about dealing with bread.
Yeah.
And that's why I told you the Gemara is going to say, really, this is about Sidur the Pas, Seder Apat. Even though really in the Mishkan, it was really about Seder for the Samamonim of Tzvayim. Now, lush, by the way, what's lush? Kneading.
Kneading, right.
So where would you have kneading? I know what kneading is for making bread. Where would I have kneading for the Samamonim? For the dyes? When you mix them together, when you actually put them in solution. So the equivalent form for this process for dyeing is putting them together in solution, dissolving the color into the solution to be whole.
Here it says right here, it says combining particles.
There you go. Okay, correct. So, and even if you simply, Gemara actually will say that even if you simply just put them together and you don't actually even stir them together, there might also be considered the beginning of lush. Okay, starting with 12, all the way down till number, until, let's see how far down is it, the same page, until 24 is actually all about wool, processing wool. Okay, you've got to cut the wool. Your gozes, semer, shearing wool, and so forth. 18, 19, and 20 are very complicated kinds of malachos. They deal with the whoop and the wharf, the loom. Right, it's hard to. We'll spend some time. We'll try to recreate them. Not today, but it's just they're different parts of the actual process of the weaving, right? And how does weaving go? You've got two different, right, up and down. Every time it goes up, you throw the shuttlecock back and forth, right? And it keeps going up and ties it, and so forth and so on. And then you have your tying. Once you've got the fabric, then you tie it together. That's kosher and matir and tofer. And then finally, part is korei almanas l'tvar. That's 24. So that's all about processing fabrics from wool. 25, 26, all the way through 31. And then including number 40, which I told you is that late addition, which really replaces one of 28 or 29, is really about processing skins, or a number of hides that we used in the Mishkan, Okay, and then and by the way, that has a lot of implication for many other things. For example, one of which is, for example, that you're cutting to shape. Malacha on 31. There's a good example. You cut a lot of things to shape. It doesn't only have to be skins, right? And but if you're cutting it to shape, and the shape is actually going to be very specific, that would be mamachko. So you like cut out a piece of paper or something. Then you have writing, which is 32 and 33. Which goes with the planks that they put the numbers on. 34, 35 is about building, right? This is about building in general and building a lot of things in the Mishkan. Then you have 36 and 37 is fire. They had to make fire, for example. This really, 36 and 37 really relate to a lot of things in processing, but it even goes back to the first set of 11. If you're going to go be cooking the dyes, you got to have a fire somewhere. Okay, and then you've got 38 and 39, which are really standalones. Makim B'Patish is the finale. They give you three examples what it is: hitting the hammer to smooth it out, smooth out the hammer, or smooth out the anvil, blow on the final blow, or striking a stone in a quarry. All these are examples of final piece of work. 39 is Hotzah, which is the Malacha we did in the first parak. So that really stands by itself. And by the way, of all the examples here, of all the Malachos, the Malacha that really stands out very separate is Hotzah, what we did in the first parak. Nothing really happened to the object in Hotzah. Everything else is about creating, making a change, shearing, cutting, smoothing. Something is going on here, right? Something is being processed, right? What happens in Hotzah is nothing's being processed. All that's processed is space, right? You've just changed the location. So in fact, the Gemara used the term, it's a malacha kalila. It's a very simple, or I want to say simple, it's a very easy, a light malacha. It doesn't mean that it's light you should do it, but it means just in terms of the actual, what is really being done. That sometimes has an implication about whether it's going to be a rabbanon, a non-rabbanon, the rice and so forth. Okay, that is it. Okay, now, I got a minute to start. Maybe we'll do the first couple, just read inside the Mishnah. We should say we start the Mishnah. How's that? Okay? Good. Mishnah's on bottom of Ayin Gimel. So we'll just do a few of them, and you can follow along with your cheat sheet, okay? Because it's really, it's paint by number here at this point. Arboim malachim avos malachos, arboim chasirachas. The avos malachos are how many? 40 minus 1. Unusual way to say it, right?
Because they knew they were going to do the sheet, so that's why they said 40.
Well, usually it's say 39, right? But it also, by the way, you would normally expect to say malachos. You'd say malachos arboim chasirachas avos malachos. Right? You wouldn't say avos malachos arboim chasirachas. So the Gemara will actually ask the question. Says, well, yeah, that's not really true. Sometimes it says this way, sometimes it says that way. Okay.
Same thing with lashes, Rabbi.
With what lashes? Correct. Same thing with lashes. 40 minus 1. So 40 was a significant number. 40 comes up for lashes, years, this. So that's why I think it's 40 minus 1. It's yeah. And the first one is Zoreya and Choresh. First one, Zoreya. There you go. Look at your cheat. Zoreya is planting. You know that, okay? Choresh is plowing. And the next one after that is going to be Kotzer, which is harvesting, right? And before you go even further, so the Gemara will just ask a very basic question about the order of the first three items. If you were a Farmer Joe, what would you do? Which would be the first of these three? First you'd plow, then you'd plant, right? So the Gemara, so the Gemara actually is going to ask that question. The Gemara is going to give an answer. I'll just tell you the answer now, and this will finish. The Gemara is going to say that we're dealing in Israel. Israel's got a lot of great advantages. One of the hardest things in Israel is the land is terrible. The Chalutzim knew that. The people in the Bible times and Talmud times knew it. And as a result, first they had to actually plow, then they had to put the seeds in, then they had to plow the seeds into the ground. So there are two plowings. So in other words, you first have to soften it up, put the seed in, then soften it up again for this even to take. So you could have thought that the second plowing is part of planting, Zoreya. Right? It's not. It's still plowing. So therefore, they put Zoreya, they skip the first one, which is the pre-plowing plowing. They start with planting, and then after that, you're plowing it in. That's another malacha. That goes back to the same malachas like the pre. So at least gives us the first three. Those are the ones that are there up until the harvesting, and then next week we'll pick up here and we'll go through it. If you lose the sheet, I have more copies, but you'll see this is going to make it so much easier to go through the Mishnah, and then really the next 2 or 3 dapim is really going through the malachos one by one or 2 by 2, one after the other. It's a really nice piece of Gemara. Okay, good. Now you got you working. Next week will be a test. Okay, I'm going to send you an email with the test. Send back the answers. There'll be
next week we're on next week.
Next week we're on. Yeah. Is there anything?